There are many different definitions of a serial killer. In 1998, a federal law was passed by the United States Congress titled Protection of Children from Sexual Predator Act of 1998. This law includes a definition of serial killings. The term serial killings means a series of 3 or more killings, not less than one of which was committed within the United States, having common characteristics such as to suggest the reasonable possibility that the crimes were committed by the same actor or actors. However, this law is to help the FBI with serial murder cases. It is not meant to be a generic definition. The FBI states that there is no generic definition of a serial murderer. Jack the Ripper was responsible for 5 of 11 murders in a small town on the East End of London in 1888. The canonical 5, as they were called, were killed with the same precision as each. They were all horribly mutilated. There have been over 100 suspects, such as a doctor or a butcher or someone with a surgical experience. Some even suspected it could have been a woman. He was never caught. He was also not thought to have killed again after November 1888. H.H. Holmes is known as one of America's first serial killers. He has a long history of criminal activities such as frauds and scams. As a medical student at University of Michigan, he stole corpses to make false insurance claims and was suspected to using them for experiments. In 1893, Holmes built a 3-story house, as to which is now called Murder Castle or House of Horrors, where he would lure his victims into and kill them. The upper floors contained living quarters and small rooms where victims were tortured and killed. Some rooms had gas jets so he could asphyxiate his victims. There were chutes and trapdoors leading to the basement for disposal of the bodies. No one is sure just how many murders occurred. However, he once admitted to killing up to 27 people. The estimations go as high as 200. He was hanged in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, May 7, 1896. William Gull, a.k.a. Billy Gull, moved to Aberdeen, Washington in 1903. Many bodies of migrant workers were found washing up on a shore near where he was tending bar. The number of floaters was so high that the town started calling the area Floater Fleet. He is suspected to have killed 130 people. However, he could only be proven for 2. He was arrested after he admittedly killed 2 people and was sentenced to 2 life terms at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla in June of 1910. After his mental state started diminishing, he was admitted to the Sedro-Woolley Mental Hospital, then transferred to the State Hospital at Medical Lake in Spokane, Washington in 1927 and died there in March at age 53. Henry Landru is known as Bluebeard and is also known as the Lady Killer of France. His father committed suicide when Henry was arrested for theft in his youth years. As an adult, he lured his victims into sham marriages, murdered them, and then burned them in his fireplace so he could claim their fortune. His predatory years started in 1915 and went all the way through World War I, which left him many widows to seduce. His victims ranged from 19 to 51 years of age. He was also convicted of 11 murders and was beheaded in 1921. Fritz Herrmann is known as the Vampire of Hanover. He spent years in prisons and mental institutions for burglaries, frauds, being homosexual, etc. He bit through the throats of his victims. He called this his love bite. His victims were all young men and boys ranging from 15 years to 20 years of age. He was convicted of more than 24 murders. However, more than 600 went missing in just 1923 alone. He has said his need to kill was stronger than the horror of cutting and chopping. Rumors say he ate some of his victims or sold them as part of the contraband meat that circulated among the public. However, he denied these accusations. He was beheaded in 1924. Albert Fish was a self-admitted molester of more than 400 children in a span of 20 years. These crimes first surfaced in 1917 and continued on through the 30s. His murder weapons he called instruments of hell were meat cleavers, butcher knives, and saws. He was delighted by the pain, whether it was himself or others. He made the neighbor children spank him with a paddle, most often had nails on it, until he bled. He also liked to burn himself and stick needles in his genitalia. He'd answer ads from widows seeking husbands. Only 46 letters he wrote to them were recovered and were so obscene that they weren't even made public. He was one of the oldest men to be executed in the electric chair. The Phantom Killer was a sadistic killer dressed in a white mask. He killed 5 people in 10 weeks in a little town called Texarkana, Texas. He sexually assaulted some of his victims as well. The murder is still unresolved. However, some thought it was a man named Hugo Swinney. He was arrested in 1947 for auto theft. His wife confessed to the crimes, however, couldn't testify against him. He remained in prison as a habitual offender until 1973 and died in 1994. He never implicated himself in the murders, though. Another disappearance in 1948 brought suspicions of the Phantom Killer, however, Swinney was already in prison. Then, in 1999 and 2000, a woman called the families of the victims and apologized for her father's actions. Swinney never had a daughter. The movie Town That Dreaded Sundown was named after this case. Harvey Glattman had only 3 victims. As a child, he developed an obsession with rope, and his parents sent him to a psychiatrist when they discovered him occasionally strangling himself. When he was released from prison for robbery, he picked up photography. He began to photograph people who were raped, pounded, and gagged by himself. He had sadistic sexual tendencies and killed with ligature strangulation. He was delighted to talk and describe his crimes with detail. He died in a gas chamber in 1959. Henry Lee Lucas killed his mother in 1960. He confessed to over 3,000 murders. He is believed to have falsely confessed for attention. However, some are believed to have been up to 200, but he was only convicted of 33. He was an alcoholic at 10 years old, and by his teens he had sex with his half-brother, killed animals for enjoyment, and then violated them. He was also abused by his father. He spent many years in prison over his lifetime and died there in 2001. A famous quote from Henry Lee Lucas was, "I hated all my life. I hated everybody. When I first grew up and can remember, I was dressed as a girl by my mother, and I stayed that way for 2 or 3 years, and after that I was treated like what I call the dog of the family. I was beaten, I was made to do things that no human being would want to do." John Wayne Gacy is known as America's Killer Clown. It was the disappearance of Robert Peace that led the police to his home. He was last seen on the way to a contractor, John Gacy, about a summer job. His interrogation was cut short due to chest pain. Due to the amount of wallets investigators found in his attic, he had 33 victims, which were young men. Police found a trap door leading to a flooded crawlspace which smelled foul. It was drained when an officer plugged a nearby cord into a socket. After drained, they found 33 bodies there. He was sentenced to death for 12 of those and natural life in prison for the others. Jeffrey Dahmer is known to have killed 17 boys between 1978 and 1991. He was both a serial killer and a sex offender. He was into rape, dismemberment, necrophilia, cannibalism, and he kept skulls as souvenirs. He had a normal childhood, however he became an alcoholic in high school and developed an interest in dead animals. He was kicked out of the army due to alcoholism. He was arrested in 1982 and 1986 for indecent exposure. One day after moving out on his own, he drugged and molested a 13-year-old boy. He was attacked twice in prison. The second time, he was beaten to death in 1994. Ronald Dominic was accused of homosexual sexual activities and tying his victims up and raping them. He had 23 victims, all of which abused drugs, used alcohol, and were prostitutes. Throughout high school, he was teased for being gay, however, he never admitted to it. He lived 2 lives, homosexual and heterosexual. He was sentenced to 8 life sentences after confessing to killing his male victims over a 10-year span. Darren Dion Van was in prison in 2009 for rape. When he was released, he was caught again in 2013 because he strangled and left the body of a woman in the bathtub in a hotel. He was caught on camera walking out of the room shortly before she was found. He admitted to killing 6 others and led them to the bodies. He is facing the death penalty.